Up next, the Powerpuff Girls continues on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Batman, the Brave and the Bold on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Ben 10 on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Ben 10 Alien Force on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Ben 10 Ultimate Alien on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Chowder on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Codename Kids Next Door on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Ed, Edd and Eddy on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Generator Rex on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Hot Wheels Battle Force 5 on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Johnny Test on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Naruto on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Mucha Lucha on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Pokemon on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo Where Are You on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Star Wars The Clone Wars on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Stoked on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Teen Titans on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Garfield on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Camp Lazlo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's The Secret Saturdays on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's the Superhero Squad Show on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Tom and Jerry on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Total Drama Action on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's an all-new Totally Spies on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's What's New Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Bakugan Battle Brawlers on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Robot Boy on Cartoon Network.